Okay, guys, welcome to yet another episode. And first of all, let me start off with the fact that I love the fact that we are twinning today. Like,
I know, right?
It's
like there was a memo, we didn't get it, but
silent memo. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about something that I find particularly interesting. We're going to be talking about founders' agreements. You know, almost every business person has a partner. And the question is, do you need to have a founders agreement? What is a founders agreement? And we have some amazing people with us today to talk about that. We have Kojo Bucknor, who I think I'll call you Mr. Serial Entrepreneur. He has an amazing taste for businesses. He partnered with his co-founder Jay Kwasi, who runs Jamestown Coffee, and they have established some amazing businesses that many people frequent. My personal favorite, Treehouse. And they also have AphroSpirits,
which is my go-to gift to people.
Ooh.
And they then later buy a case after I give them a bottle.
Thank you. I was wondering where the numbers were coming from.
Oh, definitely. It's from me, yeah.
And his latest enterprise, Petit Oiseau. Did I mention?
Le Petit Oiseau.
The little bird.
The little bird, yes.
Perfect, yeah.
We also have Amma Gyampo, my namesake, goddess, founder of ScaleUp Africa. ScaleUp Africa, how can I describe it? It is providing services, it's providing technical assistance for SMEs such as myself. Very, very impactful business. And Amma, I don't know what other things I can say about you, but you are incredible and you're great inspiration to me. And thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you guys.
Same here. I like the fact that we're also doing the kaftan thing, man.
Yes.
Okay, enough of the love fest. Let's get to the...
Let's dive in.
So, founders' agreements, right? You've decided to do a business, maybe with a friend or a professional colleague. What is it important to write the thing down, and at what stage do we write it down, and is it a big deal? Are we doing a whole thing?
May I start?
Yeah.
So I look at agreements in two forms. One, the spirit, and the letter, right? In short, my answer to that question is yes, definitely. Because these are two individuals coming into, undertake, let's call it a journey, right? And they are two individuals, right? Separate people. You definitely want to be aligned in principle with what exactly you're about to do, and in essence, what each person means to that, right? But definitely, it needs to start in the spirit, and then the letter. And in the spirit, I mean, just really a clear agreement, whether it's a discussion, just kind of laying it all out, right? In most instances, actually, in a number of the businesses that I'm involved in, it definitely took a lot longer than a couple of weeks or a couple of months. Actually, it took probably a year or so before we had an actual agreement, right? And the main reason is, although in my previous life, right, I was basically, my career was based on just kind of setting up businesses, projects, and it was all about agreements, right? At every point, at every interface point, there was an agreement. Starting with friends, actually, starting businesses with friends. The reality is, it's really a conversation. Let's, what can we do here, right? AlleyBar started by seeing a dilapidated alley when Kwasi wanted, to get a warehouse, and we'll go see it, and then the idea is, why don't we turn this into a bar, right? As simple as that. So how do you write out a full agreement? And agreements are clauses, right? That you probably need to think worst case scenario to be able to draft the perfect agreement, right? To mitigate all the risks that you think will come further down the line, whether it's it's this close or far. So I think in short, the spirit of it is the initial agreement, right? Where you get into the detail of who's doing what exactly are we doing, how are we going to do it, how are we funding it, how much are you bringing, how much am I bringing, and how all that kind of crystallizes into either a shareholding or really how it's all structured. I'll leave it here and just kind of go with the conversation. And, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's really important to establish who the boss is. Sometimes it's friends, girls, boys, and then it becomes this business concept, right?
Right.
100% of the time, someone would have led that idea and will have the expertise, the experience, the background to drive what will become the business, right? So I think respecting the fact that there is a CEO in the mix, I think that's the first step. The minute you feel, 50-50, let's just do it, let's go ahead, I think you're royally in trouble, right? So I think there is a need to establish the dynamics and respect each other's roles. If I'm a CEO, I respect that maybe I'm a very technical person. I might need a co-founder to support me because they're good at sales or they're good at operations or they're good at marketing, for example. And that's a big deficit for me personally as a CEO. So I think appreciating one's strengths, one's weaknesses, understanding there's a CEO in the mix, bringing in the co-founders and establishing the fact that you want to motivate a team, okay? But would that person be a better worker or partner? These are things not everyone is going to be a good entrepreneur or partner to you as a CEO, right? So I think these are the things you need to actually examine very critically before you rush into any agreement. And it's the same with hiring. Are you hiring for skill or are you hiring for attitude and characteristics? So these are the little nuances that I think people tend to overlook. Yeah. And if you don't deal with them at the very beginning, they tend to catch up with you.
Could we take a deeper dive into the last point you made? Because in reality, I find that many entrepreneurs do have an idea, and if they had their own way, they would be the sole founders. But they find, let's say, I started a venture, I meet NanaAma, I cannot pay NanaAma as if I'm bringing her on, say, as a legal counsel, but I would rather probably suggest the idea of her coming on board as a co-founder. So the idea for her to come as a co-founder was an afterthought because I did not have the money to pay her immediately. Right. So, I want us to, can we talk more about the considerations that many people in that same situation would have to consider and to make when they are bringing someone on board, not necessarily because that was the initial plan for them to co-found, but because it just kind of happened. I don't have money to pay you, but maybe I can give you equity, and in that arrangement, you become a co-founder.
But the thing is, equity of what, right? Like you're not in business until you actually can prove that people appreciate the solution you're giving to them. Yeah. Whether it's Treehouse, whether it's AlleyBar, whether it's ScaleUp Africa, whether it's NanaAma's firm, what is the value you're offering, and is someone or enough people willing to pay for that service? If you're not able to generate money or revenues, it's just an idea. It's just a nice idea on a spreadsheet somewhere, and you guys are doing your boys, girls on Friday night talking about the business. So I think it's really about the ability of the other person that you're bringing on as a CEO to translate or bring something, whether it's a clientele base or relationships or a sales background that they can translate into revenue for the business. If you assess those things carefully, then you have a better chance of succeeding in the business.
Well, this is interesting. In that situation, you actually really need to be careful. I have, an example in mind, right? Okay. Where just too many people were offered equity, right? What happens is, for me, look, equity is almost the last resort of a partnership, right? There are different ways in which you can actually work with people, right? But not give, equity. Because when that goes out, you've basically shared the decision making, right? That reduces how nimble you are as a person, a founder, or the nimble nature of the business itself. And you run the risk of having everybody feel that level of entitlement so much that you have too many cooks in the kitchen, right?
That's a good point.
And I have a very clear example in mind. And for a while I struggled somewhat emotionally, right, with this. And so you'd look in setting up partnerships, you really want to assess what type of partner, right, you're bringing on board and how you structure that partnership. Extremely important. Because you can tell I'm trying to say
Not say too much.
not say too much.
Feel free.
Who was it? No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
Who were they?
Kojo, but that is so important, because sometimes you don't actually know what the person can do until you get into the situation.
Exactly.
Yes.
Sometimes you're both in corporate, and then you decide to do a venture.
Exactly.
And then you realize that actually that person needs to be in a structure, and they don't have the entrepreneurial spirit
To cope.
because it's the risk, it's scary sometimes.
Yes.
So you don't know until you get in. So my question is, do you split the equity at the beginning? You said no, which I thought was really interesting. So how do you bridge that gap where you're all putting stuff in, and then at some point one dude is not getting equity?
I think you need some caps, though, right? If you are, I agree with your point about equity probably being the last part of the process, because you do want to see what they can bring, what they can do within the constraints of what you have created as a CEO, right? You're the originator. But I think that there are certain tools that you can apply legally, in terms of vesting, in terms of having a limited period beyond which they can't claim to be a shareholder. Actually, you need to have a time, right? A period where they get the chance to prove themselves, bring whatever.
How long?
Maybe 2 years. Most
wow.
startups. Yeah, because in this environment, I think 2 years is a minimum.
That's
In this environment, it normally would be a year. If you go to Silicon Valley, it will be a year. But in Ghana, it's a different terrain altogether.
That's actually
So I think you need, and most startups will fail. Like year one, I forget the percentage, 70%, 80%, 90% failure, right? That's standard across the world, actually.
Over 90% fail.
It's something, it's a very, very high rate of failure. So that's the reality. So you're most likely not to succeed anyway. But on the off chance that you have something real and something tangible, something long term, you need to really take your time with the process, because if you haven't got the right person with the right culture, the right mindset, the right background, the right contacts and networks, the ability to translate into business, then maybe they should just be an employee later down the line, not your partner.
This is actually pretty interesting, because then that begs the question, what converts it, right, into equity? What do you need to do, right, during that period to actually earn, right, that equity?
And those metrics should be clear. I think that those are the things. Like, what if I'm expecting someone to be a salesperson and they don't bring any sales after a year or 2 years, 3 years? I mean, obviously they have failed at that task. If I'm expected to bring in contracts based on my background and I'm not bringing contracts into to translate into revenue, then I failed.
You know what's interesting with this as well is most businesses that start really, it starts as an idea, but you really don't know what it takes to actually get the business. And I think you touched on it, earlier.
Figuring it out,
right? How much is going to cost to actually get it off the ground? That's one. How much is going to, what is going to, and what it needs, right, to actually convert from just an idea to a money-making venture. And most of the time, you actually learn that on
the job.
The job, right? And I feel most, people who start with an idea and just kind of pull people together, and, the point you were making earlier. And the reason why I think it's dangerous is, you pull everybody together and you, in your mind, you're coming in, okay, so you lawyer, you accountant, you sales, you marketing, in the future, and this is where people overpromise, we're all getting equity, right? The question is, what percentage of equity does that, that scope of work, right? Translate to? And in the end, what happens is you probably have 2 or 3 people in this conversation that just started as an idea, right? Started as a conversation, basically just kind of moving that pin from here to there, right? And turning into a full business. But in the end, once it's not discussed early and laid out very clearly, and once you have too many people around the table, you can't award equity based on merit, because there's just too many people, and as we're all in, we said we're all going to have equity, right? So now everybody gets 2%, for instance. Why? You're totally right. Some people are not made, right, to be entrepreneurs or to play the small game, right? Because entrepreneurship is really, learning the small game. And people who are in corporates that, work for multi-billion-dollar companies probably don't understand the small game. Why? Because everything is there. So when it gets to it, you have a totally different, understanding of what it takes to actually move it from here to, what
next level
actually should be.